Welcome to TOAMagic.com's Auction of the People pre-stream. We're breaking down the 8 decks that will be featured in this exclusive event for the top 8 players in our EE6 leaderboard. These are all decks that have won a Grand Prix in the Legacy format in the past 12 years. That said, let's get to some decks.
Here we have Esper Stoneblade, piloted to a victory by Tom Martell at Grand Prix Indianapolis in 2012. This deck was following the release of Dark Ascension, as you can see the 4 copies of Lingering Souls in the deck, a very powerful card brought to us by that set. So could you walk us through the game plan of the Esper Stoneblade deck?
So this deck is on the Stoneforge Mystic strategy, but is operating a little bit bigger than a lot of the other ones. Delver Secrets from Innistrad was kind of a big deal at the time. This was when Delver kind of started to get into its full swing. So Lingering Souls is one of the cleanest answers to Delver Secrets because you get to trade the front half or the back half of Lingering Souls for the entire Insectile Aberration. You still have the strong Stoneforge synergies that we've seen before with things like Umezawa's Jitte and Batterskull. You're also seeing a cut of Force of Wills in 3 main deck copies instead of 4, which is a nod to how fair the format was overall. And you're seeing a little bit of a blending of discard and permission, whereas a lot of the older decks would be heavier on one or the other. This is the first time you're really seeing the combination of Thoughtseize plus Force of Will and Legacy.
This is also the deck that brought us the lovely combination of Cast Intuition, find 3 Lingering Souls. Here's my 8 power, we'll go from there.
Yeah, this deck is really designed to operate over multiple turns at once, in that you're stocking your graveyard so that you have these options. There's a couple other Intuition piles you can go with. You can go for the 3 Force of Will pile, or the Vindicate Snapcaster Mage sort of strategy, depending on what you need to deal with at the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of flexible answers in the deck, assuming that you're able to survive till turn 4 or 5. So, and, we talked a little bit about this, but what other interesting main deck inclusions point to how Legacy looked in 2012?
There was a single Vendilion Click, a nod to some of the combo strategies that were prevalent at the time. 1 Tower of the Magistrate in the mana base. It was 1 tap. Target creature gains protection from artifacts, as a nod to how popular the Stoneforge Mystic strategies were. You were able to give your opponent's Germ protection from artifacts, and the Batterskull would fall off. You do have 1 Vindicate, kind of to play the catch-all. Legacy was a pretty wide open format at this point still, and there's a lot of I'm going to play my turn 1 Trinisphere, turn 2 Magus of the Tabernacle, turn 3 Smokestack, and having cards that answer those strategies is fairly important.
Yeah, it does seem good to have some 1-for-1 catch-all answers if you're trimming the Force of Will from the main deck. So having the Vindicate, the Spell Snare cards like that make a lot of sense in this deck. So how difficult would you consider this deck to be? I know we'd mentioned that you're planning the game on, okay, this is what my next 3 or 4 turns will look like with these Intuition piles and Snapcaster Mage cards like that.
Yep. And this is still kind of a generic brainstorm strategy, though. At the end of the day, you're not seeing a divergence from how Magic's played today. Switching over from a deck like Sultai, like Bug Delver, to this strategy isn't going to be as hard as some of the other changes. So even though you have some bigger cards, some wired decision trees, this deck is going to be more on the straightforward, here's my game plan, I'm going to win.
Yeah, this deck seems a bit more forgiving than the Delver strategies because your cards just pound for pound are a little bit more powerful. You don't have to worry about having a Dead Daze in your hand on turn 5.
Anytime that you get to play with Batterskull, that's a pretty good saving grace.
Yep.
And Lingering Souls just gives you a ton of time to play Magic.
So how do you feel about the sideboard of this deck, comparing Legacy in 2012 to the format we have before us?
The sideboard has the 4th Force of Will and the hodgepodge of 1 and 2 ofs. I don't think the sideboard necessarily has the pound for pound strength that it's going to need to take on some of these other decks. I think the Death and Taxes matchup is going to be kind of tough. I don't think this deck is going to have a great game against Goblins, even though it does have the Stoneforge Mystic strategy. Lingering Souls is not an effective anti-Goblin strategy.
It does have these surgical extractions for the graveyard-based decks, which does seem pretty powerful.
Against a deck like Lands, though, you have the surgicals. The deck is fairly weak to the mana-based disruption and doesn't pack the efficient clock that you really want to see in those sorts of matchups. So I think the Stoneblade is probably going to have an edge against something like the blue-white-red Delver deck, but it's going to be weaker against a lot of the rest of the field.
Yep, that makes sense. And finally, how much life and cards do you see being paid for the choice to play the Esper Stoneblade strategy?
I think we're going to stay at a fairly high amount of everything. You definitely need a lot of life to develop your board, get your Jason on the field, and so on and so forth. I think we're going to be at like a 6 life, or 6 card, 15, 16 life sort of game plan.
Yeah, that sounds about right for this deck. And yeah, this is the Esper Stoneblade strategy. Took down a Grand Prix Indianapolis in 2012, piloted by Tom Martell.